Hi, I'm Aria, 27 years old, and this is the story of how my fiancé betrayed me with my own sister, and how my family chose her over me. But instead of breaking me, I broke them. Completely. The night Adrian came home late, I knew something was off. He had that look in his eyes, the same one I'd seen the first time he lied to me, the same one he thought I was too naive to catch. But I wasn't naive anymore. I'd been silent long enough, and silence is the best cover for someone who's planning. Before I dive in, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had someone look at you like you were too weak, too quiet, or too invisible to matter, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, this story is proof that silence can be deadly. Growing up in the Morgan household, I was always the shadow. My mother, Evelyn, made sure of that. My sister, Sienna, was her golden child, showered with praise, wrapped in designer dresses, always the one in the spotlight. And me? I was tolerated. Federal dressed. But never celebrated. It wasn't even subtle. Birthdays came and went with lopsided cakes for me and glittering banquets for Sienna. When I came home with awards from school, Evelyn would smile politely and set them aside, her eyes already on Sienna's next dance recital or charity luncheon. Evelyn used to say, "Aria, some people were born to shine. Others, they're better suited to watch." So I learned to watch. Closely. At first, I thought this invisibility was a curse. But over time, I realized it was a weapon. Because while Evelyn obsessed over Sienna, while Sienna paraded around like the world owed her its admiration, I noticed things. Quiet things. Things no one thought I was clever enough to piece together. And Adrian made the fatal mistake of thinking I was too dull to suspect anything at all. When I first met Adrian, I wanted so badly to believe in him. He had that effortless charm that made strangers lean closer just to hear him laugh. The expensive watch. The crisp suits. The voice that could soothe a room and manipulate it at the same time. He courted me with precision. Flowers at my desk, reservations at places I couldn't dream of affording, whispered promises of a future that finally felt like something mine. And for a while, I let myself believe. I let myself imagine a life where I wasn't invisible. Where someone saw me, wanted me, cherished me. But men like Adrian don't build futures. They build illusions. And illusions always crack. The first crack came the night he slipped and called me by my sister's name. We were sitting on the couch, a movie humming quietly in the background, when he leaned in and murmured, "Sienna, pass me the blanket." I froze. His eyes widened immediately, his smile too quick, too smooth. "Oh, I meant Aria. I'm just tired. Long day, babe." I laughed it off. At least, on the outside. But inside, something cold shifted. Tired men don't keep lipstick-stained napkins in their jacket pockets. Tired men don't step onto balconies to whisper into their phones when their fiancés are supposedly asleep. I didn't confront him. Not right away. No. I watched. Because revenge isn't impulsive. It's patient. The longer I watched, the uglier the truth became. Adrian wasn't just careless with me, he was reckless with everything. His company was bleeding money, though he painted it up with flashy investors and smooth-talking presentations. He juggled mistresses like it was sport. And most importantly, he had entangled himself with the two people I thought couldn't possibly betray me further, my mother and my sister. Yes. Evelyn and Sienna. Evelyn thought she was orchestrating the perfect union, Adrian with his charm, Sienna with her beauty. She didn't see me as his partner, not really. I was just the placeholder, the training wheels until he could make the real match. Sienna was no better. She thrived on stealing anything that made me happy. Toys as a child. Friends in high school. And now? My fiancé. They thought I'd shatter when I found out. That I'd cry, scream, beg them to explain. They expected my silence to mean weakness. But silence doesn't mean weak. Silence means planning. And plan, I did. I stayed up nights with my laptop glowing in the dark, scrolling through financial records Adrian thought were hidden. Shell companies. Forged contracts. Debt stacked on debts. Piece by piece, I built a map of his empire. And then, like a surgeon with a scalpel, I started cutting the strings. Quietly. Discreetly. I contacted Marcus Hale, one of the city's sharpest attorneys. We drafted paperwork that looked like lifelines. Every signature Adrian scribbled in arrogance, every deal he thought would save him, actually pulled him deeper into my trap. And he never suspected a thing. Why would he? I was Arya, the quiet one, the overlooked one. The perfect cover. But even the best laid traps need the perfect stage for their reveal. And Evelyn provided it on a silver platter. Her annual charity gala was coming up, a parade of wealth and prestige where the Morgans could flaunt their influence. Sienna would be dazzling in a gown that cost more than most people's cars. Evelyn would bask in the attention. And Adrian? He would show up, thinking he had already won. And me? I would finally step out of the shadows. That night, I arrived in a gown Sienna had once mocked for being too understated. But that's the thing about being understated. It makes you unforgettable when you finally decide to be seen. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne glasses clinking, cameras flashing. Politicians, businessmen, socialites, everyone who mattered in Evelyn's world was there. And then, right on cue, Adrian walked in. With Sienna on his arm. Not as siblings. Not as allies. But as lovers, their act of casual, far too polished to be real. The whispers spread like wildfire. I saw Evelyn's face go pale, then tighten with forced composure. And me? I stood at the center of it all, calm, collected, sipping my drink as if I had been expecting this performance all along. Because I had. Later that night, Adrian cornered me. His voice was low, sharp, his mask slipping. Don't look so smug, Arya. You can't win against us. I tilted my head, studying him like a specimen under glass. My heart wasn't pounding anymore. My voice wasn't trembling. I felt in control. You still don't get it, do you? I whispered. The game was over before you even realized we were playing. And in that moment, for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. That fear was only the beginning. Adrian's words from the gala echoed in my head long after the music had faded and the lights dimmed. You can't win against us. Us. That was the part that cut deepest. He wasn't just talking about himself and Sienna. He meant Evelyn, too. My own mother. I went home that night to an empty apartment. My gown still clung to me, stiff with the smell of perfume and champagne. I sat in front of the mirror, mascara streaked from the humidity, and just stared. Not at myself. Not really. At the silence. It was the kind of silence that swallowed you whole, that pressed into your chest until it hurt. For a moment, just one fleeting moment, I almost believed them. I almost believed that I was nothing. The invisible daughter. The unwanted fiancé. The mistake. That's the power of betrayal. It doesn't just wound you, it makes you doubt your own worth. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But the tears never came. Instead, I felt something colder. Heavier. A quiet, simmering rage that settled into my bones like iron. The days after the gala blurred together. Everywhere I turned, I felt the shift in how people looked at me. At the grocery store, whispers followed me down the aisle. At the gym, people avoided eye contact. At work, colleagues offered tight, awkward smiles, as though they pitied me but didn't dare speak it aloud. The tabloids were merciless. Morgan heiress replaced by her own sister. Adrian Blackwell and Sienna Morgan, the city's new power couple. And Evelyn? She didn't even bother to call. I sat on my couch one evening, scrolling through the headlines until my eyes blurred. My phone buzzed, and for one naive second, I thought it might be Adrian, or maybe even Sienna, offering some kind of apology. But it was Evelyn. Her message was short. Cold. Surgical. Arya, I think it's best if you keep a low profile for now. Your presence only complicates things. Let Sienna handle the attention. My fingers trembled as I read it. Not because I was surprised, but because of how expected it felt. She wasn't embarrassed that Adrian had cheated. She wasn't furious that her daughters were now publicly entangled in a scandal. No. She was just embarrassed by me. By my existence. That was the night I promised myself something. I wouldn't just get revenge on Adrian. I would make Evelyn and Sienna feel the weight of what it's like to be invisible. To be dismissed. To be nothing. But wanting revenge and executing it are two very different things. And for all my planning, there were nights when doubt crept in. Nights when I lay awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, asking myself, what if I fail? What if they're right? One night, I even picked up my phone and started drafting a message to Adrian. Something desperate. Something pathetic. Begging him to explain. Begging him to tell me it wasn't true. I typed it out. Deleted it. Typed it again. Deleted it again. Finally, I threw my phone across the room and curled into myself on the couch. My chest hurt from holding in the sobs, but I refused to let them out. Because I knew, if I broke, if I showed weakness, I'd never recover. Instead, I whispered to myself, over and over. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is planning. But silence can also be dangerous. Because the more I watched Adrian, the more reckless he became. He thought he was untouchable, flaunting Sienna in public, signing deals left and right without even skimming the details. And every time he put his pen to paper, I was there, in the shadows, pulling the strings tighter. Still, there were close calls. Once, late at night, Adrian walked into his office unexpectedly while I was downloading files from his computer. My heart stopped. The room was dark except for the glow of the screen, and I froze, my hands slick with sweat. He paused at the doorway, squinting. Arya? What are you doing in here? Think. I forced a laugh, shaking my head. I was just looking up vacation spots. You've been so stressed lately, I thought maybe a getaway would help. His suspicion melted instantly, replaced with that arrogant grin. He walked over, wrapped his arms around me, kissed the top of my head. You're too good to me, you know that, he murmured. I smiled back, but inside, my heart was still pounding against my ribs. Too close. Way too close. Another time, Sienna nearly caught me meeting with Marcus Hale. I'd chosen a quiet cafe on the far side of town, thinking no one would see us. But as Marcus slid a set of documents across the table, my stomach dropped. Sienna walked in. She hadn't seen me yet. She was laughing with a friend, her hair bouncing in that perfect way that made people stare. I panicked, shoving the papers back into Marcus's briefcase. Go, I whispered. Marcus didn't hesitate. He snapped the bag shut, stood, and left out the back door just as Sienna's eyes scanned the room. For a terrifying moment, her gaze lingered on me. She tilted her head, as if debating whether to come over. But then she shrugged, turned back to her friend, and ordered a latte. I didn't breathe until I was back in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. That was the thing about revenge, it wasn't just about patience. It was about control. One slip, one mistake, and the whole thing could collapse. Still, the deeper I got, the stronger I felt. Because while Adrian and Sienna basked in the spotlight, while Evelyn orchestrated her picture-perfect fantasy, I was the one moving the pieces behind the curtain. And every night, when I closed my laptop, I whispered to myself. They think I'm invisible. They're about to find out how dangerous the invisible one can be. There's a moment, in every war, when the balance shifts. When fear gives way to power. When survival transforms into strategy. For me, that moment came one crisp morning in early spring. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing, another headline, another photo of Adrian and Sienna plastered across the gossip pages. They were all over the city, sipping champagne at rooftop bars, smiling for paparazzi, posing as the perfect couple. The article's headline made me laugh out loud. Adrian Blackwell's new muse, how Sienna Morgan brought him back to life. Back to life. As if I had been the death of him. That was the moment I stopped questioning myself. I wasn't the villain in their story. They were the villains in mine. And villains don't win. Not in my world. I doubled down. Every move became calculated, deliberate. Marcus Hale worked his magic with contracts, slipping clauses into deals Adrian never read. Ethan Cross built firewalls and backdoors, turning Adrian's accounts into a maze only I could navigate. And me? I played my role to perfection. I smiled when I had to, stayed silent when it suited me, and every so often, I let Adrian believe he still had me wrapped around his finger. One night, he called me, drunk, sloppy, nostalgic. "Arya," he slurred, "you know you were always my safe place, right? Even now, with Sienna, it's not the same. You were, real." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Because for a second, I almost wanted to believe him. Almost. But instead, I whispered back, soft and sweet. "Then you'll always have me, Adrian." He sighed, content, before passing out mid-sentence. And that was the exact night Marcus sent me the final set of papers. Adrian had just unknowingly signed away his controlling interest in his own company. All it took was one more stroke of the pen. But my plan wasn't just about Adrian. No. I wanted Evelyn and Sienna to feel it too. So I began weaving subtle cracks into their perfect little world. I leaked whispers into society circles, rumors of Adrian's instability, of debts unpaid, of partnerships gone sour. By the time Evelyn heard them, the stories had already taken root, spreading like wildfire. I watched from the shadows as she worked to do damage control, dialing her contacts, smoothing ruffled feathers. But the more she patched, the more I pulled. At a charity luncheon, I accidentally let slip to a board member that Sienna wasn't prepared for the responsibilities that came with the Morgan name. At a dinner, I sweetly asked Adrian if he'd managed to resolve that situation with his investors, loud enough for the table to hear. And at an engagement party Evelyn hosted, her crowning jewel, I wore a dress the color of blood and smiled like I had a secret no one else knew. Because I did. It was that night, the engagement party, that everything shifted again. The ballroom glowed with golden light, laughter echoing off the marble walls. Sienna sparkled in silver, clinging to Adrian's arm like she had already won. Evelyn floated through the room like a queen, orchestrating every detail. And me? I was the ghost who refused to stay buried. Halfway through the evening, I caught Adrian watching me. Not Sienna. Me. His gaze lingered just a second too long. His hand twitched at his side, as though resisting the urge to reach for me. And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't just haunting them. I was still in his head. Later that night, as the music swelled, I stepped onto the balcony for some air. And who should follow me but Adrian himself? "Arya," he whispered, his voice low, urgent. "Why are you doing this? Why are you here?" I turned, letting the moonlight catch my smile. "Why wouldn't I be?" I asked softly. "I'm family, remember?" His jaw tightened. "You're playing a dangerous game." "No, Adrian," I whispered, leaning closer. "You are." I brushed past him, leaving him frozen, unsettled, unsure. And I knew then, I had him exactly where I wanted him. But revenge isn't just about rattling cages. It's about timing. So I waited. I let them believe they were untouchable. I let them dig their graves deeper, signing papers, spending money, flaunting their empire. Until, piece by piece, I began pulling it all away. First, Adrian's credit cards mysteriously stopped working. Then, one of his accounts was frozen. Then, whispers about unpaid debts became louder, more insistent. He tried to fix it, of course. But every solution only led him deeper into the trap. And Evelyn? She was furious. I'll never forget the day she called me, her voice sharp with panic. Arya, you have to talk to him. Adrian isn't listening to me, and the investors are restless. This could ruin us. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I let silence stretch for a moment before answering, my voice calm, deliberate. Funny, I said softly, how the family disappointment is the only one you turn to when things fall apart. She sputtered, trying to backtrack, but I hung up before she could. That was the sweetest call I'd ever received. By now, I could feel the momentum. The tide was turning. Sienna was embarrassed publicly when her card was declined at a high-end boutique. Adrian snapped at her in front of photographers, cracks showing in their perfect facade. And Evelyn? She was scrambling, trying to control a fire she didn't even realize I had started. Every move I made, every string I pulled, brought me closer to the finale. And as I stood at my window one night, watching the city glitter below me, I whispered to myself. They wanted me invisible. They wanted me silent. They forgot silence is when I plan. The game wasn't over. Not yet. But the ending? The ending was already mine. The morning the trap finally snapped shut was deceptively ordinary. Gray skies. Coffee in my hand. The city humming like nothing had changed. But I knew. By nightfall, Adrian Blackwell's empire would be dust. It started with the investors. For weeks, I'd been feeding them quiet truths, leaked documents, whispers of debts, proof of contracts Adrian had signed without reading. At first, they ignored the warning signs. He was Adrian Blackwell. The golden boy. The charmer. But charm doesn't pay overdue loans. And lies can't cover missing millions. That morning, Marcus Hale delivered the final blow, a stack of contracts, each bearing Adrian's signature, each transferring control of his assets directly to me. He had walked himself straight into the grave I dug. By noon, Adrian's phone was flooded with calls. Investors demanding answers. Partners pulling out. His face flushed red as he barked orders into the receiver, his voice cracking with desperation. I wasn't there to see it. But I didn't need to be. I had already booked my front row seat for the gala that evening. The charity gala Evelyn had been planning for months was supposed to be her crowning moment. A night of cameras, applause, and glowing headlines. Instead, it became the stage for their downfall. I arrived deliberately late, in a gown so sharp it could cut glass. The air buzzed with tension, guests whispering, journalists circling like vultures. Evelyn floated through the room with a brittle smile, her eyes darting nervously. Sienna clung to Adrian's arm, her expression tight, forced. And Adrian, he looked like a man already drowning. Sweat glistened at his temples. His laugh was too loud, too sharp. The collapse had begun. The first crack appeared when a photographer shouted a question across the room. Adrian, is it true your company just lost 3 major contracts? The ballroom went silent. Adrian's jaw tightened, his smile stiff. No comment. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her champagne glass, knuckles white. Sienna shifted uncomfortably, tugging at Adrian's sleeve. And me? I sipped my drink and watched. The second crack came minutes later, when an investor stormed into the gala, red-faced and furious. You lied to us, Blackwell. You signed everything away. Gasps echoed. Cameras flashed. Evelyn's carefully curated image shattered in an instant. Adrian tried to calm him, tried to spin excuses, but it was useless. Because at that exact moment, Marcus Hale appeared at the edge of the ballroom. Beside him, Ethan Cross carried a slim leather folder. My folder. They crossed the floor with deliberate calm, the crowd parting around them like water. And then, Marcus handed the folder directly to Adrian. Perhaps you should read this, Marcus said smoothly. Adrian's hands shook as he opened it. His eyes scanned the pages, line after line of betrayal signed in his own handwriting. His face drained of color, lips parting soundlessly. The room buzzed with whispers. Sienna leaned over his shoulder, reading, her expression twisting from confusion to horror. This can't be real, she gasped. But it was. Every asset. Every contract. Every lifeline. Gone. And all of it mine. Adrian's voice cracked, raw with panic. Arya, you did this? Every head turned toward me. Evelyn's glare burned holes through my skin. Sienna's eyes filled with fury. Adrian looked like he'd seen a ghost. I set my glass down carefully, letting silence stretch. Then I smiled. You still don't understand, do you? The game was over long before tonight. You just didn't know you'd already lost. Gasps swept the room. Cameras clicked wildly. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was the storm they never saw coming. The aftermath unfolded like dominoes. Adrian's company collapsed within days. Bankruptcy filings, lawsuits, headlines splashed across every paper. His perfect reputation crumbled into dust. Sienna, stripped of her glittering fiancé and her chance at the spotlight, lashed out publicly, blaming him, blaming Evelyn, blaming anyone but herself. And Evelyn? The matriarch who had spent her life polishing her legacy now watched it slip through her fingers. Her calls went unanswered. Her allies turned their backs. And the Golden family name became synonymous with scandal. The Morgan Empire, built on image and illusion, was rubble. I'll never forget the moment it all came full circle. I walked into Evelyn's marble foyer one evening, uninvited, just to watch. Sienna was screaming, mascara streaked down her cheeks. You promised me everything, she shrieked at Adrian, her voice echoing off the stone walls. Adrian's reply was hoarse, broken. I had everything, until your sister took it. Both their eyes turned toward me. Sienna's full of rage. Adrian's full of desperation. Evelyn's burning with silent fury. And me? I smiled. Correction, I said softly. You never had it. It was always mine. The tabloids erupted the next morning. Golden Morgan daughter's engagement scandal. From heiress to humiliation, the fall of Sienna Morgan. Adrian Blackwell, from business icon to ruined man. Their names dragged through headlines, their faces plastered across covers. And me? I was barely mentioned. Just a quiet shadow in the background. Exactly how I wanted it. Because true revenge isn't about shouting your victory. It's about sipping champagne while your enemies burn. The last time I saw Adrian, he was unrecognizable. Sitting alone in a dingy cafe, suit wrinkled, eyes hollow. A ghost of the man who once thought he was untouchable. He looked up when I entered, hope flickering briefly in his expression. Maybe he wanted to beg. Maybe he wanted to curse me. I didn't give him the chance. I set a folded note on his table and walked away. When he opened it, 3 words stared back at him. Checkmate. Arya. That night, I stood by my apartment window, the city lights splintering against the glass like broken promises. Evelyn no longer called. Sienna had blocked me on every platform. Adrian was ruined. And me? I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the disappointment. I was untouchable. I raised my glass, the champagne fizzing like victory, and whispered into the night. They wanted me silent. They forgot silence is when I plan.